I would encourage you to pick up your Bibles, whatever form you brought them, and go to the book of Proverbs. We are going to continue our probe of the Proverbs. It is impossible, but we're doing it anyway. We plan to cover Proverbs in 3 lessons. And so last week was an introductory type, and now this week we begin to look at the meat of the Proverbs. Before we get there, 2 or 3 things. Number 1, if you've not had a chance to get online and see what is happening with our Vimeo and the YouTube stuff, you need to do that. It is impressive. Our people that run that are incredibly good. And the thing that is very pleasant to me is that when you are there, the singing catches everybody, not just the song leader. And that is impressive. I mean, it really sounds good. If you've not taken the chance to get online and look at any of them, I would encourage you to do it because it is really well done. It's a marvelous ministry that is happening there. Next Sunday night, I've been asked to say, Ed is at his trip tonight, hopefully, doing well. Next Saturday is Ed's birthday, and there are plans in the works to have something for Ed for his birthday next Sunday night. It may be that he can't travel here, and if so, there is a plan in place maybe that we can go over there and sing to him. So we're working. Somebody is. We'll get you some more info about that next Sunday night. I was asked to let you know about that. And Miss Lena, it's good to see you out. I'm glad you're here. Can you have big hugs yet, or does it still hurt? Oh, you can't? Oh, tender hugs. Tender hugs still. It takes a while for ribs to heal. Okay. I know, because one of my first years at Rolling Hills Bible Camp, there's a really nice guy who decided he'd show off, and he broke my ribs in basketball. And it was interesting. I won, but he broke my ribs. Okay. That's the important part, right? All right, back to the Proverbs. Last week I told you that Mike said I'm cheating because I'm doing the class on Thursday night. At least I think I told you that. Let's imagine that I didn't, so I can tell it again because it's a great story. He said when he heard that I was doing this, he told Bree, he said, that's not fair. He's cheating, not studying for sermons because he's doing that class on Thursday night. And he's telling me about it, and I found out that Sunday morning in a Bible class in Georgetown, he taught the same material. So I think he's cheating as well. So, Mike, I found something in the study for tonight that we haven't even shared with the class. Brand new stuff, just so you know, I'm not cheating. All right. Here's what I want to propose to you. The outline of the Proverbs, basically in a general way, can be handled. Chapters 1 through 9 are Solomon's words to his son. Chapter 10 through 29 is a compilation of individual proverbs that oftentimes do not have any more than one little proverb, one little verse connected contextually. Chapter 30, we find the wisdom of another man, Agur, and then in chapter 31, we find the wisdom of a woman talking to her son. And next week, that's where we will be at the end of the book to notice the things that are there. What I would like for you to do before next week, if you would email, send me a text, whatever, anybody who wants to, send me what is your favorite proverb from chapters 10 through 29. That's what we're doing in the class. And those in the class on Thursday night are getting a proverb. They are responsible for studying it in depth, and then we're going to discuss it in the class. send me your favorite proverb, if you will, and I'd like to notice them. These are all in that section of 10 through 29 is what I would like to hear from. But for right now, finishing out the first section of the Proverbs, I want you to notice with me a heading that I want you to see. And basically, this study is going to relate to some in-depth material. There's a lot more here than we have time to study, but let me give you a few things. I would suggest to you that when he begins in verse number 10, going through chapter 9, Solomon is saying to his son, there are two ways you can go, but only one real choice. Here are two options for you, but there's only one that's any good. Two ways, one choice. I want you to notice how these two ways are contrasted in these 9 chapters. First of all, if you will, notice verse 10. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. This word entice is a word that basically has someone saying, come on, you're too narrow-minded. Get on board with this. Open up. Open your mind. And you can get a hold of this and see how good that it is. Now look at some phrases about the one way that he's describing. Verse 11, let us lie in wait. Let us lurk secretly. Let us swallow them alive. Verse 18, they lie in wait. They lurk secretly. That same phraseology happens in chapter 7 and verse number 12. Lurking at every corner. It's also found in chapter 12, verse 6, chapter 23, verse 28, chapter 24, verse 15. What I want you to notice is the way that he is describing right now is a way called a secret, dark, lie in wait. As he presents this throughout these chapters, we find a scenario drawn up where this way is depicted by an immoral woman trying to draw you off of the path. That's how Solomon chooses to talk to his son. In the class, we've discussed why is that. On the one hand, it seems like the women are getting all the bad press in the book of Proverbs. It's not really true, because in the Proverbs, men are called simple fools. So we both take it. And obviously what is happening here, we've surmised that Solomon is talking, number one, about things that relate to the commonality of men and the commonality of women. He may also be speaking from his own knowledge. It may be that his own, not maybe, it was, his own mother. Of course, the child died, but she was pregnant outside of marriage. He knows what that's about. And he himself has all of these wives and concubines. So he knows the concept, the draw away from God by immoral women, which they did. And so that's what he's characterizing here. And everyone here that's saying, come on and go with us, they lie in wait in secret around the corner. And that's how they're dealing with the sin. Chapter 7. Notice the vision that he paints. Starting in verse 6. Chapter 7, verse 6. At the window of my house I looked through the lattice, and saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths, a man devoid of understanding, passing along the street near her corner. He took the path to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. This way is depicted throughout as the way that secretly whispers around the corner. When you pass by, come on over here. And we could put any number of things in that category, could we not? We could picture the man selling drugs around the corner. Hey, come over here. We could picture criminals planning a scheme in the dark of night. We could picture all kinds of things under this motif of whispering, enticing, drawing from around the corner off the path where you need to be walking. Now that's one way. But now look at the other way. Quite fascinating. Verse 20 of chapter 1. Wisdom calls aloud outside. She raises her voice in the open squares. She cries out in the chief concourses, at the openings of the gates in the city. She speaks her words. This word calls out in the open, calls aloud, is a verb that means to overcome, to give out a ringing cry. That's how the other way is described. Look at verse 24 of chapter 1. I've called you and you refused. I stretched out my hand and no one regarded. I called you. That's the same word. I yelled out to you. I was screaming to you. Look at verse 28. They will call on me, but I will not answer. There will come a time when you will yell for me, but I'm not going to listen anymore. Look at chapter 2, verse 3. If you cry out for discernment. Chapter 8, verses 1 and 4. Does not wisdom cry out and understanding lift up her voice? Verse 3, she cries out by the gates, at the entry of the city, at the entrance of the doors. And finally, chapter 9, verse 3, she cries out from the highest places of the city. The one way was depicted as an immoral woman beckoning you off the path in a low whisper, sometimes yelling out enough to get your attention. Come around here. Get off the path. But on the other hand, ladies, you are exalted because the book depicts wisdom as a godly woman. Wisdom is depicted as a woman. And what is wisdom doing? This woman is standing in the open marketplace, yelling and screaming, listen to me. Come over here, everybody. This is where wisdom resides. This is where you need to be. Don't go over there. Come over here. So you have two women depicted in the Proverbs, both trying to get the attention of people. I find it fascinating that the motif of wisdom crying out in public calls to mind these words from Solomon's dad in Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no place where the voice is not heard. The wisdom of God is crying out every single day, loudly proclaiming to everyone. In fact, as Romans 1 describes it, he cried out so clearly and so loudly that no one has an excuse anymore. He said they are without excuse because I've been yelling at them through the creation. These are the contrasting lifestyles. The woman who secretly whispers to draw you away, whereas the woman standing in the marketplace yelling and screaming, "Come over here." I think that is also fascinating because who are people listening to? The whisper, the dark, around the corner. While God is loudly proclaiming Himself, people are not listening to what is being loudly proclaimed. They are listening to that still small voice that pulls away. I think it is obvious why. The quiet whisper appeals to the flesh. The loud screaming wisdom appeals to the spiritual man and his mind. These are the two ways that Solomon describes for his son. These are the two paths that are calling out to you. A few points that I want to notice as we see what is going on here. First of all, this phrase, lurks secretly. Lurks secretly. Look at chapter 2, verse 1. My son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you. Same Hebrew word. Treasure within you. Verse 7. He stores up wisdom for the upright. Stores up. Same word. Translated for the other path, lurk secretly. Chapter 7, verse 1. Treasure my commands. Same one. Chapter 10, verse 14. Wise people store up knowledge. Same word as lurks secretly. Chapter 13, verse 22. The wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. And finally, chapter 27 and verse number 16. The same terminology. Whoever restrains her, that is the contentious woman, whoever restrains her, same word, restrains the wind and grasps oil with his hand. Here's what I find. The woman who is lurking around the corner, lurking secretly, in the same terminology, Solomon tells his son to protect his secret part, his heart, his inside, in the same terminology. On the one hand, the woman is saying in a stealthy way, in a secret way, look over here. So what is the protection for listening to that voice, come over here. What do? You treasure it up. You combat that with what Solomon is offering. So while the woman is speaking to what's deep inside of you, that's why they're lurking there. Solomon says, protect that part of you so that you will not listen to that voice that inevitably will come. I think that's pretty cool. Notice how this also plays out as far as the text. He lays out his proposition, chapter 1. Then in chapter 2, he says, receive my words. Here's what I'm going to tell you. You listen to what I have to say. Incline your ear, verse 2. Chapter 3, he says, and do not do these things. Do not forget my law. And the whole chapter uses the phrase, do not, over and over and over. Then he comes to chapter 4 and he says, my children, hear the instruction of a father. Give attention to know understanding. When Solomon began, he said one of his purposes was to give knowledge. Solomon says here in verse 1 of chapter 4, you give attention to know. This word I introduced to you last week is the word yada. And I did some research. Apparently, they do believe the possibility is there that Yoda was named on this Hebrew word for knowledge. If you're a Star Wars fan, you know what I'm talking about. Yada. It's a word that means knowledge based on experience. So Solomon says, you need to listen to a father. Why? I have experience, he says. Listen to me. Chapter 5. Let me tell you some things you don't know. Look at verse 1. You pay attention. Why? Because of verse 6. You don't know these things. My son, you don't have experience here. Listen to me. Which, by the way, he said in chapter 4, verse 19, the wicked don't know either. So what do you not know? What did his son not know? His son did not know what the end is when you listen to the woman around the corner, the first part of chapter 5. What did his son not know? His son did not know what it was like to be married and to have that kind of relationship with a woman at the end of chapter 5. Chapter 6, what did he not know? He didn't know that if you sign a loan for a friend, you're going to get in trouble. If you're going to be the guarantor of what he owes, you need to get away from that. He didn't know it. His son Rehoboam had access to a lot of money, didn't he? As the king's son. How many people do you think were asking him for a loan? How many people do you think he needed to sign for? Solomon says, you don't know. He'd be willing maybe to do it. He says, you don't know. Verse 6, if you choose to do these things that you don't know, you're nothing but a slug. You're lazy because you're not listening to me. You're not mentally engaged. Ants, go watch them. They are wonderful. But wicked people, verses 12 through 19, the Lord hates what they do. You don't know the things you think you know. So verse 20, beware of adultery. Beware. Don't get caught up in all of that. Then in chapter 7, he gives that little story of what he saw. Treasure this up in your hearts. You need to hear, protect yourself. And And then in chapters 8 and 9, he says, the other way is the way of wisdom. I want you to hear a beautiful passage of Scripture as we close. Turn with me to chapter 8, starting in verse 22. In the Proverbs, Solomon and others do what is called personification, taking an idea and putting human traits on it. Listen to what Solomon said about wisdom. Chapter 8, verse 22. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his ways, before his works of old. I have been established from everlasting, from the beginning, before there was ever an earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. While as yet he had not made the earth or the fields or the primal dust of the world, when he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle in the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limits so that the waters would not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him as a master craftsman. I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him, rejoicing in his inhabited world. My delight was with the sons of men. Wisdom personified then became flesh. Jesus Christ. The wisdom of God, whose delight was with the sons of men. That's why he came. Jesus is the wisdom of God. And in the Old Testament, we see his wisdom. And wisdom personified became flesh and dwelt among us. Two ways, but only one real choice. As we close, chapter 9, starting verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For by me your days will be multiplied, and years of life will be added to you. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you will bear it alone. He says to his son, if you listen to me, you'll be wise, and it'll help you. You will realize it. You'll be a better person. You'll have a better life. But if you scoff at these things, you're going to pay the price. Isn't that what life is about? Isn't it about noticing two ways? Jesus described it as the broad way that leads to destruction and the narrow way that leads to life. Those who choose wisely live life fully. Those who don't pay the price. Tonight, if you're not on the pathway of wisdom, the pathway that is right, you're going to pay a price. And like Solomon warned his son, we warn ourselves tonight to get right with the Lord. Two ways, one choice. What is your choice tonight? Do you need us to help you in some way as you make proper choices for your life? If you'll come, let us help you while we stand and sing.